Hi, it's Darren from SimNation. Just wanted to do a quick video for SNCFL, a kind of recap video, if you will. We've just completed week 8 on Tuesday, and we're halfway through the season, and we're starting to really kind of get into the second half of the season. Teams are either going to make the championship, make a bowl, or they're just going to fade away and start dreaming about next season. From a top 25 perspective, we have a new number one. Miami is at number one. This is, of course, Gary, who is a long-standing coach and probably one of the best coaches in the league. So really happy that he's been able to get the number one and hold it. At number two is Skeletor. Despite all of his bitching last season, he's really got this team dialed in this year. They bounced back really well, and Skeletor has a couple games that he's got to win with Louisiana Monroe, but he's definitely in the driver's seat when it comes to the SEC West. And of course, they're at number two. At number three is Maryland. Maryland just got done beating Ohio State, so on Tuesday they get Indiana tonight, and then on Saturday they will, of course, play Michigan, which is Stewart's squad. So it'll be interesting to see if Maryland can remain undefeated, and if they can, then they're likely going to be the ones to represent the Big Ten East. Stewart, he's pretty much got the Pac-12 South in hand with UCLA. Just phenomenal season that he's having with UCLA, and he's recruiting at a high level too, and I'll show you that in a second. The shock probably in the top 5 is Iowa State. Shark has just really made this team into something special, and I'll show you that real quick. So Shark took them over. They were really horrible, and I might be being polite by saying that they were horrible. But when he took them over, they were one of the worst teams in the league. And since he's had them, he's incrementally made them better every single season. So he made it to the playoffs last season. I'm sorry, the season before last, and was knocked out in the first round, but then had the same record last season, which was arguably probably the hardest conference we've had in a while in SNCFL history because of just the sheer number of human coaches in the Big 12. But he didn't make the playoffs. He just missed. But this season, he's just doing a phenomenal job with them. He's got them in the top 5. They are on a path to where they could actually make it into the championship game. And, of course, if they make it in the championship game, they're likely making it into the playoffs. So great job, Shark. Coming at number 7 is Oklahoma. This is Steve. He had an early loss, but he's since bounced back. And Oklahoma is on a collision course with that championship game. They still, if I'm not mistaken, have Frankie and Oklahoma State in their path, but they just got done beating Texas Tech, so Oklahoma's still one of the favorites in the Big 12. Coming in at number 8 is Stewart with his Western Michigan squad. They're going to go undefeated probably in the regular season unless Stewart loses a game he shouldn't. There's no one in the MAC that can even compete with Western Michigan. They will move out of the MAC in the next season because I need to create some competition for Western Michigan because it's getting to the point where they're going to make the playoffs every year if I keep them in the MAC. LSU comes in at number 9. They've had a kind of up and down season. A lot of injuries this year have hurt them on the defensive side of the ball, but they're coming off a pretty solid win against Alabama. Of course, they did lose to Auburn, and that may hurt their chances if Auburn were to get past Louisiana Monroe in a few weeks. But you have LSU and Louisiana Monroe on Saturday, which is going to be a big game between Skeletor and myself. Rounding out the top 10 is likely going to be the team that is in the driver's seat for the SEC East, which is Georgia. Shark has done a great job with them this year. He just got done beating Florida, and that's, of course, SOA. And he just needs to win out, and then it's his. If he drops a game, there's a chance that SOA could take it back. because SOA, they have the same record in league play, and SOA could actually just run away with that. Probably if you asked me of the two Frankie teams, which one would actually be in the top 15, I would have said Oklahoma State. So Iowa is just having a good season. I know they're still probably driving Frankie crazy. He's probably lost a lot of hair over it. But, I mean, they had a 1-point loss to Purdue, and outside of that, they have just been solid throughout the season. They got past Barry at Wisconsin. This week's game with Minnesota, who is, of course, Starfinder, will likely determine who will go into the championship game from the West. Now, Starfinder comes in at number 12. I hate to say it, I kind of think Starfinder might, even if he loses to Frankie this week, he may still have a chance at being able to get into the playoffs. And, of course, Minnesota's undefeated. So even if he loses, he only has one loss. And what that means is that loss to Purdue by Iowa could come back to haunt Frankie in his Iowa Hawkeyes, because he's still got to play Michigan. And Michigan is Stewart, and that is a really solid squad, though. So even if he beats Minnesota, he's got to beat Michigan because he's already got one loss in the conference play. Clemson is a really good CPU team. If you want to join the league, I would say definitely take a good, long, hard look at Clemson or East Carolina. NC State, this is Van. So Van and I go back a long time. He was in Ballbound, the WWCF for a while, and he was just a phenomenal coach still. His only loss this year is, of course, to East Carolina, who's beating everybody right now. But Van is in a very good position to make a run at a championship. He's still got Clemson, still got Florida State. So Clemson, of course, is CPU. Florida State's just sample. But his triple option attack is really working well for him again. Thought he'd take a little bit of a step back when they lost Fulcher last year, who went to the WWPF, which is our Draft Day Sports Pro Football League. But they haven't shown any signs of that. Of course, Michigan, Stewart's dream is that they win a Big Ten East or a Big Ten title. In his way, he's been the constant threat of Maryland. Stewart doesn't have an easy schedule ahead of him. Even if he beats Maryland, he's still got to get by Iowa, and then, of course, he's got to get by DP and Ohio State in the final game of the season. But I think it benefits him to have an open week that allows his quarterback to get healthy. As you can see, they have some issues with injuries as well. And then, of course, they got to travel to College Park. That's never easy. And then also go to Iowa City to take on Iowa. So those two games are going to largely make or break him. It's a good squad, though. LaFleur is one of the top running backs, and Stewart is a really, really solid coach. So we'll see how that plays out. DP, of course, lost to Maryland this week. And then his only other loss is to Steve at Oklahoma. So, I mean, when you think about it, Ohio State's only two losses this year are to two top 10 teams. So he's got a pretty good schedule going forward, which he should be able to make a pretty solid run at. Bates is back, which is good because Ohio State with Bates is better than Ohio State without Bates. So that should allow him to open his attack up, and he won't again face a good team until he plays Michigan. Gotta stop saying no. So Boise State comes in at number 20. This is Skeldor. He's done a phenomenal job with Boise State. He was cussing like a sailor last year because of Boise State, because they had a quarterback in Benjamin Antonio that you really could have thrown the ball with, but he couldn't get it to work, so he went back to his rushing staple. This year, they're doing good with throwing the ball, so he definitely figured it out. They're going to win the conference more than likely. The only person that likely may be able to get in their way is Nevada, who is on the other side in the West, whereas I think they're in the mountain. But this is just a really solid team. Corey McMurray is one of the best running backs in the league. As you can see, he's getting it done on the ground, but his defense is nothing to laugh at. The defense is playing really, really solid. You got Coates with 8 sacks, and then you got people like Richard Wall with 2 interceptions and a defensive touchdown. So, yeah, I think Boise State's largely going to win the Mountain West this year. Nevada's not a slouch, but it's on CPU, and I don't know that they're going to be able to slow them down. I will say that hopefully one of these years Skelter can figure out Colorado State, because he's now lost to them twice. On the flip side, you have Frankie with Oklahoma State. I really don't feel like the ranking is justified in some regards. They've had a really solid season. They are a really good team. I think if they can get past Iowa State and Shark this week, and that's probably the game of the week outside of the Iowa versus Minnesota game, they should be able to start climbing up the top 25. It's a brutal schedule, though, going forward, because they have Iowa State at home, then they get Mike with West Virginia, and then they get Kevin at Texas, and Kevin needs to win that game, so he's going to be very motivated. And then, of course, they end their season with Oklahoma. This is a really hard schedule, and this is the reason why I'm not quite sure that they're going to be able to make the championship game. Because Oklahoma is a really good team, but while I say that, I'll also tell you Frankie's probably one of the best coaches in the whole league. So if anyone's going to pull it off, it's Frankie. So if they beat Iowa State, I think that they should be able to make a run. Last year when Oklahoma and Oklahoma State met, Frankie won that one pretty big. So we'll see if Steve has adjusted to Frankie. But that's a pretty tough schedule. But again, if he gets past Shark this week, I think Kevin could trip him up, but I don't think West Virginia or at Baylor will be able to trip him up. Oklahoma would be the next logical thing. McDougal is just having a phenomenal season. He's only played 7 games. He leads the league in yards per game. So Frankie's done a really good job. Crutchell's probably not been as good as Frankie was hoping at quarterback, but he'll figure it out. Soa with Florida. Soa's not out of the race by any measure of the stick. I mean, they lost to Missouri and Georgia, but the remaining schedule minus Auburn is one that he could win out. So, like I mentioned before, Georgia is going to need to really win out in order to keep Soa away from this. That Auburn game is going to be tough. Auburn already beat LSU this year when they were ranked in the top 5, so that's a game just to keep an eye on. But Soa's got a good chance of making a run. At the same time, the person who I kind of want to talk a little bit about is Bama. Bama has Virginia Tech, and Virginia Tech sucked before Bama. And he's just done a phenomenal job. Part of that's Jesse McIntosh at quarterback. He's having a year. He's up there in the leaders in passing. And Bama has just continued to do very, very well. I mean, they knocked off Alabama. That one must have been a little bit bittersweet for him, considering that he is actually an Alabama fan. They beat just Sample at Florida State, and not many people can say that. And this week will be the really big test for them, where they have Gary at Miami, and then, of course, next week they turn around and have to play UVA, which that one should be fun. Just context-wise, I live in Virginia. I'm not a UVA or a Virginia Tech fan. I won't root for either of those two schools because I'm a Maryland fan. So every time I get asked which one, I'm just kind of neither. But anytime someone beats UVA, I'm happy. So I do put Virginia Tech behind UVA in terms of hate. But I'll be rooting for him this week. But I think he's got a good chance. I think he could upset Miami this week. If he does, Look for them to just shoot up the Coastal, and that would actually put them in the driver's seat to win the Coastal. Now, the key, of course, is Gary's still undefeated at Miami. So even if he loses, Gary has a pretty good chance. Now, the 104-0, Duke sucks, but that's still something you got to work out. This offense has been humming all year, and as you can tell, it's only going to get worse next year because he's done a phenomenal job of recruiting. Jesse Payne is just having a lights-out season, so is Benjamin Culp, and he's doing it on both sides of the ball. So Virginia Tech's going to be a hard game, but again, Gary really doesn't have a hard schedule ahead of him. And then if we look at Louisiana Monroe, just because I feel like I missed on a couple of these, Skelter's got a hard schedule ahead of him. He's got LSU, Auburn, both on the schedule, and both those teams could trip him relatively easy. He's probably giving a lot of Excedrin to Ashby to make sure that he can play because it's a different squad without Ashby. Georgia-wise, I mentioned Georgia needs to avoid being tripped up. I think he's got a good chance of that not happening. So Shark doesn't traditionally lose games that he should win. So I think he's in pretty good shape. His only two losses, of course, were to Louisiana Monroe and Auburn, who are both really good teams this year. But South Carolina, Kentucky, Tennessee, he should be able to win those, especially with Udo not at Tennessee right now. So it'll be interesting to watch, see what happens. Just some other teams to kind of keep an eye on. I mentioned NC State already. Florida State, Jess Sample is a really good coach. He's just been dealing with injuries all year long. Part of that has been Asa Garcia getting hurt. Then he got Jeremy Garcia hurt. So it's been really hard for him to get any rhythm going, although he's got one going right now. Asa Garcia is one of the best potential quarterbacks in the league. Jeremy Garcia was having a great season until he got hurt. So, I mean, in general, I would tell you that the injuries have just slowed down Florida State. And it kind of happened last year as well. Cable is still struggling a little bit at Central Florida. He mathematically could still win, but he's largely out of the race in the East. It's really between East Carolina and Cincinnati, between those two. And then in the West, it's really hard. I don't know that anybody wants it. So it's really between Tulane, Houston, and Southern Methodist. Tulane's a little bit of a shock to me, candidly. I didn't expect them to be there, but Cable needs to win this week in order to get himself closer to a bowl berth. I talked about the Big 12, which is how wide open it is, and it's still pretty wide open. You've got these three teams with one loss and then a bunch of teams with two losses. But really the front runners right now are Oklahoma, Iowa State, Oklahoma State. Again, I mentioned Oklahoma State's schedule is pretty brutal, so is Oklahoma's. Shark actually has a clearer line than most. Texas also, with Kevin, has a pretty clear line. Texas Tech, it's just not going to happen. We'll look at them real quick. They started off the year really strong, of course, knocking off Frankie and Oklahoma State. And then they lost their starting quarterback in the West Virginia game. But I don't see a path that they actually get there. So I really think it's, if you're looking at who's really in play, it's Oklahoma, Iowa State, Texas, and Oklahoma State. Mathematically, Starfinder and Brigham Young are still in it. But he's going to largely have to win out, and he's still got Oklahoma on the schedule. It's not impossible, but he's lost two of the big games he's had so far this season with Iowa State and Texas. So I think, just candidly, BYU's about a year or two away from really competing for the championship. In the Big Ten, already talked about this, it's really a two-horse race in the East. Could be three, but Ohio State needs some things to bounce their direction. It's really Maryland versus Michigan. But Ohio State, if they don't get it this year, they have a good chance next year because they are recruiting at a high level. We talked about this before. Barry's at Wisconsin. Wisconsin's probably not doing as well as Barry wanted them to, but when you look at his losses, he lost to Stewart, he lost to DP at Ohio State, and he lost to Frankie at Iowa. Those are hard games. He's winning a lot of the games he should. North Texas is a lot harder than they look. They are actually one of the front runners in their league in Conference USA. So I already mentioned that. And I'm just going to jump around a little bit here. Starfinder, it's been a pretty brutal year for Fresno State. He'll get them on track ultimately, but again, another year or two before they're probably competing for a bowl berth, maybe another 3 seasons before they're in the playoffs. I think the story in the Pac-12 is Washington State. Washington State entered as probably a clear favorite in the North and to win the Pac-12 or at least compete for it and make the playoffs. They're likely going to do none of those things this year. They've lost 3 times, twice to, I think, Skelter. They lost in week 1 to Louisiana Monroe. Then they lost to UCLA and then Stanford. Now, they do have an easy schedule going forward, so they could bounce back, make a run, and make the playoffs. But I don't see a path for them to get to the championship game for the Pac-12 this year. Really, the race is going to come down to Stanford or Washington. Now, of course, if Stanford loses out, they've got a hard game this week against Van. But I would need for Arizona or Colorado to beat them, and I don't see that happening. So even if they lose this week, they still have a pretty clear path. Washington is the other team competing. I don't see Washington being able to get there. If Van was still there, I think it's a different story, but he's not. So Shark is still getting his feet under him at Oregon. Give him a season and they'll be competing for the North as well. Same with Van. Give him a season and he'll be competing. So the North is going to get really competitive very fast. So Washington State may have lost their main opportunity. They still have the phenomenal rushing attack. You have 2 people who are in the top 10 in rushers. UCLA, again, I don't see a path where UCLA doesn't win the South. Theoretically, Utah could get it, but it's not going to happen. So Richard Harper's had a great season, and again, you can see Stewart's recruiting on a high level. We talked about the SEC already. Georgia is the front runner, but they just need to win out because of the 2 losses. South Carolina could get in there, but I don't see that happening. It's really them versus Florida, and uphill it's really Louisiana Monroe, Louisiana State, and Auburn are the 3 in competition. The last one is Georgia Southern. This is DWK. Probably not the season he wanted to have, but there's potential in this team. He's just got to get it on track. They've had some issues with defense largely, but give it a season or 2, he'll be winning the Sun Belt. So that's it for now. If you have any questions, let me know, or you want to know anything, let me know. But that's just a quick recap video, and I will leave it there.